Wake Up to Money from BBC 5 Live.
Hello, welcome to the Wake Up to Money podcast. So, are you up for hundreds of pounds extra in tax each year to help clear an NHS backlog and then pay for our social care?
Is it fair that those people that are working are paying for those people that aren't working?
Keeping up with Kim Kardashian, the financial regulators take an aim at the way influencers promote cryptocurrencies, and it's tough getting an HGV driving test, but would the lifestyle mean you'd want to keep on trucking?
A lot of these HGV drivers are out 4 nights a week, sleeping in lay-bys, sleeping in their cabs.
Wake Up to Money with Sean Farrington.
Eclectic Wake Up to Money as ever this morning. I've even got jotted down chessboard shortages for us to try and discuss at some point. That will keep Kate McCarthy-Booth on her toes, non-executive advisor, founder of McCarthy Recruitment, who's with me on the show this morning. Morning to you, Kate.
Morning, Sean.
Morning. Chessboards, they've been on the agenda for you. Looks like Chess Mania has lured millions of people to get on board during the pandemic.
I did buy a chessboard last year, actually, for my 6-year-old who really suddenly got into chess, which I thought was surprising and very early, but desperately wanted to learn how to play chess. What
was the trigger? Were you watching The Queen's Gambit on Netflix, or...?
It was a bit of that. I do think that's made a difference. I loved that, by the way. It was an amazing production. But yeah, no, really into it. And I haven't got a clue, Sean, because I never learned to play chess.
I love it, but also isn't it one of those things when you start browsing, Kate? I mean, it seemed like, because I think I had a browse of a chessboard at one point last year and never quite made the plunge. You could spend fortunes, and it could potentially be a beautiful bit of furniture in your living room, or when it's for a 6-year-old, can you just get the sort of the cheapest plastic fold-up board that's around, and they're happy with that?
I think so. There's a mid-ground, isn't there? We went for something that was wooden, because I think plastic and chess doesn't sit right for some reason.
See, there you go.
but not too expensive. But yeah, I kind of get it. I think it would. Yeah, it could get dust on it if it was a nice piece of furniture. To be fair, I think in our house.
Chess aficionados, get in touch with us today. 85058 #WakeUpToMoney. How much are you spending on your chessboard? Have you been one of these? The Times reporting millions of players getting on board over the last year. I've got Will Walker on as well, senior investment manager at Charles Stanley. Morning to you, Will.
Morning, Sean. You right?
Yes, I'm good. Chess for you or not?
Yeah, no, I also was influenced by Queen's Gambit, so we did get a very cheap chessboard whilst watching that series. So yeah, I've got back into it recently.
No, well, reports of boards being sold out. Yet another shortages story for us on Wake Up to Money. But that's enough chess chat for now, guys, because actually what's going to be a real big issue for people this week, the debate is going to hot up today as we get an announcement from Boris Jonson, is about tax rises. Well, have we really seen the kind of conversation from the government led by the Conservatives for the last 11 years so sort of confident and so heading in a certain direction, certainly by the leader, Boris Jonson, of tax rises on the way for so many workers? Will.
Sorry, Sean, I didn't realise you were talking to me then. Yes, I mean, it's something which is highly controversial, isn't it? Because of what they talked about during the election, that they were not going to increase taxes, and they were going to keep that triple lock in place on pensions. And from what I'm reading this morning, both are in question. Clearly, the pandemic has put huge strain on public finances, and they're having to raise money. But it's a very controversial measure, and you can hear the stirrings from particularly the right-wing backbenchers of the Tory party.
Kate, every day you've been looking at different sectors. We've talked to you over the course of the pandemic how you've had to change tack a bit of which sectors you're focusing on recruitment-wise. Can workers and businesses afford a national insurance rise of? It's been talked about as being around 1%, which means that lots of employers and lots of people who are working, self-employed or PAYE, are going to have to pay potentially hundreds of pounds more a year for this.
I think it's a really controversial conversation, isn't it, Sean? Because obviously they've spent an absolute fortune and it needs to be paid back. And I think we talked about this probably a year ago, saying there was obviously going to be some tax increase. And yes, they promised in their 2019 manifesto that there's going to be no increase across the board, whether it's national insurance or income tax, but you can't spend money and not claim it back somewhere. So for me, it's not a surprise. Is it a really difficult tax, national insurance in sense? It's always been a bit of a hidden rise when they've risen, when national insurance has risen before, it's kind of gone under the radar, and this time it's been really talked about as, I suppose the tax for the job age tax. I think it's difficult. It attacks businesses in a sense as well as workers, so that they're raising a lot more as a result of that. Can businesses afford it? I think at the minute it's really difficult because businesses are trying to get back on the feet. But I kind of sit on a fence, and that's unusual for me, Sean, because I've got both sides on. We do need to reinvest in the NHS and social care. There is a real issue that's been there for a very, very long time. Is the timing right? I think it's a difficult time at the moment for everybody.
Well, it'll be fascinating to see what the detail is today, because you're looking at reports in the papers, it's been talked about as being called a health and social care levy, actually appearing as a separate line on our pay slips. So not necessarily alongside the national insurance deductions that we already see. It will literally be a new line below it. So is it really national insurance that we're talking about here? Are we talking about a brand new levy, full stop? Working pensioners, the Daily Mail says, will pay it, whereas national insurance at the minute, if you're of state pension age and you're working, you don't have to pay national insurance. The idea being it'll be legally ring-fenced, and then there'll be some discussion about the cap as well. So the Mail saying it could contribute in 3 years' time to funding a new cap of £80,000 on paying for people's social care. The Times saying it could be as low as £50,000. So we'll see the small print of that as well. Later in the show, we're going to be talking about how the tax works around this, and how whether national insurance is a good way to do it, who it means will end up paying if national insurance is increased, if it is a brand new levy where working age pensioners will pay for the part of the increase as well. Does that mean we've got a new tax on our hands? Income tax, national insurance, and now health and social care levy. Is it a brand new income tax on the way? So all of that to come. If you've got questions, 85058, hashtag wake up to money. We've got a tax expert on the show a bit later as well. We're going to have a chat about Brexit now. There's been another delay to these full post-Brexit checks for goods going into Northern Ireland from Great Britain. So supermarkets currently face only light touch checks under what we've had so far has been this grace period. It was due to end at the end of the month, but that's been extended indefinitely at the minute. Brexit Minister Lord Frost said that the move was necessary to provide space for further potential discussions with the EU. Well, are we going to just be kicking the can down the road forever, or is this something that is still providing a lot of uncertainty for businesses, and particularly consumers and businesses based in Northern Ireland who aren't able to trade so much like they were before all the new Brexit rules came in?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen reports in particular from M&S have been highlighting the problems in actually getting goods over from Europe, because I think in terms of food, I think 20% of our food comes from the European mainland. So if you increase red tape and bureaucracy, it's going to make it much more difficult to obviously keep the shelves in supermarkets full and brimming. So it looks like for the moment they haven't organised themselves to get around all this bureaucracy, so they are going to kick the can down the road once again, and that will please business in the short term, but they're going to have to come up with some sort of remedy longer term, because with Christmas approaching we can't afford to have those shelves empty.
Kate, every time we hear of a shortage, particularly job shortage, we get often business owners coming out saying it's COVID and Brexit, and it's quite difficult depending on which sector you're looking at to sort of see in that moment and which business you're talking to how much right now each one is having an impact, Brexit or COVID. But when you're looking at a whole labour market, have you seen changes in the labour market because of the new Brexit rules that came in at the beginning of the year?
100%. I think the labour shortages that we're experiencing at the moment, I mean, I've talked a lot about it being a perfect storm, and it's a perfect storm with the labour market, it's a perfect storm with the supply chain. Brexit has brought so many new complexities. It's made lots of things much more onerous. It's complicated. Marks and Spencer's talked about 40,000 documents a week currently, and if the grace period hadn't been extended up to 120,000, the 40,000 is already crazy. There were a lot of the new rules that came in that's affected. They've had to employ vets. There's a shortage of vets. We seem to have a shortage of lots of skills, and I do believe a lot of people that worked in England when the UK went home during COVID, and then it's difficult for them to get back because of Brexit, and that is really affecting us on lots of levels.
So would you be expecting, as travel picks up, workers to come back to the UK market?
I don't know, actually. I think it might take a while, and I think it's very complicated to come back. Brexit has really affected that ability. It's made it much harder. And I'm not sure we're as attractive as we used to be.
Kate, have you got a headquarters? Have you got somewhere where staff are based? Wondering if everybody's flocking in this week?
Yes, we do. We're mainly based in Warrington, and we've changed the way we work, and lots of people are coming back. But we have a new flexibility that 2 days are always going to be able to be work from home for our team moving forward. They're set days, so we changed that quite a while ago, and we've been kind of a full team for 2 or 3 days a week for probably the last 3 or 4 months now.
Will, were you part of the march into central London yesterday? Transport for London saying it was the busiest morning on the tube since March 2020. Passenger numbers up 20% on last week.
I've got to be honest, no, I wasn't in yesterday, but for us, the key date is the 1st of October as a company, because that's the point where we formally move into what's called a hybrid working structure. So from that point on, I'll be working 2 or 3 days in the office, 2 days at home, and we're sort of building up to that point over the coming months. So yeah, 1st of October is the key date for us. Where
are you sitting yourself? Are you sort of working as flexibly as your bosses will possibly allow you, or do you just want to be in?
I'm sitting right in the middle on the fence, Sean, there. I can see the value of the hybrid model. I kind of think that we'll look back in 20 years' time and think it was completely bonkers that you were getting all the commuters to come in and leave town exactly at the same time, 7 in the morning, 7 in the evening. I think you've got to spread the load throughout the day, and I think it makes people much more productive. So I think the hybrid is going to be the future going forward. You're in the office for collaboration, interaction with colleagues and clients, but you get your desk-based work done at home.
I see that roads in many towns and cities around the UK were as busy as they were 2 years ago as well. So it's not just on the tube in London. Here's Rich Lee, who runs Radioactive PR in Gloucester. His staff are back in. He says it's much better.
I've got to be honest, it's so good to be back. A lot of the team are feeding exactly the same thing back to us. We were quite well equipped from a remote working perspective, shared drives, and Zoom was already a thing we used, but it still took some getting used to, even with that. And if I'm honest, in a creative industry like PR, it's just not the same having that distance between you. There's nothing like being able to bounce off of each other. That's been a big reason why we're keen to get back in. And not least, you see on Twitter a lot of people saying about going back to the office and I'll never go back. Those people are very often older, in more senior roles. A lot of people in PR are in the early years of their career. And I think you lose so much by not being around.
Were you on the roads yesterday? Did you make that tube journey in 85058, hashtag wake up to money? We were hearing yesterday from one of our guests how their bosses have said you have to be in next 2 weeks, everybody in. They're calling it a circuit breaker to sort of, break the trend of the last year or so, and then in a couple of weeks we'll talk again.
Wake up to money from BBC 5 Live.
Thank you for your messages this morning. Ian in Lincoln. Surely everyone understands the need to raise taxes. They'll hit the little guy as usual. They should hit the rich, who've got richer by billions over the pandemic. How are you feeling about effectively a national insurance rise of 1% or so? I'm going to be talking about that just after 5:30. Got a tax expert lined up. So if you've got any questions about how that might work and about how much money is raised and all of that, do get in touch. 85058, hashtag wake up to money. Let's head to Munich, shall we? Our international business correspondent, Theo Leggett, is at the International Mobility Show over there. Morning to you, Theo.
Morning, Sean.
You keep off the beers last night in Munich? It was a tricky thing to do, surely.
I found a lovely little brewery, but Sean, I knew I was going to be speaking to you this morning, so I had to be very disciplined.
Oh, this is what our correspondents do for us. It's very, very kind of you, Theo. Theo, what, you often go to a lot of car shows. I'm expecting this to be something to do with that. What is the International Mobility Show?
Well, it's what used to be the German International Auto Show. It used to be held in Frankfurt, had been for 50 years or more. But that show was dying because the conventional car show had become too expensive, too glitzy, and was coming under an enormous amount of pressure because of political factors about getting rid of petrol and diesel cars. So what they've done is they've sort of reinvented it. There are car manufacturers here, but all they're really showing off is electric vehicles. And there's all sorts of other people as well. So, for example, cycle manufacturers and people who make little electric scooters and all that sort of thing. So they're trying to sort of position the car as part of an overall solution to climate neutral mobility.
Interesting. And so what's the big, there's always big themes, aren't there? What's the big one for this particular show?
Well, I'd say the big worry for the car manufacturers, at least at the moment, is the ongoing chip shortage, which you've probably heard about. I'm not talking about the chips you eat, I'm talking about semiconductors. And for months now, the car industry has been grappling with a real problem, that they can't get enough of them. This is partly a problem that was caused by COVID, because in the early stages of the pandemic, the car manufacturers pretty much had to shut up shop. Factories were closed, dealerships were closed, they weren't selling any cars, and people were staying at home and ordering a lot of consumer electronics. So all the chips that would normally have been fitted in cars were sold elsewhere. And then when the car industry reopened, there was suddenly a lot of pent-up demand for cars, and they couldn't get the chips they needed. So factories have had to idle, production lines have had to be shut down when the car makers wanted to be selling as many cars as possible. And that situation was supposed to be getting better. But in fact, it's been getting worse because of an outbreak of COVID in Malaysia, where a lot of these things are made, among other reasons. So all the car makers have been affected. We've heard from Toyota, we've heard from General Motors, we've heard from Stellantis. They're having to delay deliveries of cars. And yesterday I spoke to the chairman of Daimler, which is the parent company of Mercedes-Benz, Ola Källenius. I asked him about this, and he told me he thinks the shortage could even drag on into 2023.
We have experienced a shutdown here in the third quarter, primarily in Malaysia due to COVID shutdowns. And what we have said is it will significantly impact production and sales in the third quarter. And with hope that in the fourth quarter we can start kind of coming back up to some sort of a normal production level. Structurally, the wafer producers and the chip producers say this will bleed into 2022 from a structural point of view, and then gradually get better.
So it could go on into 2023 then?
It could, but probably and hopefully not at the level of severity that we have experienced here in the last couple of months.
Doesn't sound too good, Theo, if you're in the market for a new car right now.
No, it doesn't. And I also spoke to Harold Kruger, who's a board member at Bosch, one of the world's biggest parts and systems suppliers. And he told me that he's described the chip supply chain as inept, and he says it really needs a change.
What I meant is traditional sourcing mechanisms was very short-term sided. So car makers said we need the parts in a month, and then the whole supply chain got the initial starting point to do something. On semiconductor, you have sometimes 6 months of production time, just production. So that means there's nothing like a short-term ordering or deordering of parts. And this is why for semiconductor, it doesn't work like for injection molding parts, for example.
Is that why we're seeing the current crisis at the moment, the shortage of semiconductors?
It's part of that, but I think the biggest reason of that is we have a great demand for cars with a lot of new features, and that's good news. Just 1 year ago, we were in the dark age of Corona, and sales were down, and nobody expected such a quick recovery of the car market, and that I think is the biggest cause for this supply squeeze that we have at this time, because the demand had picked up so fast.
Kate, I am told that you're in the market for a new car at the minute. I mean, Theo, as anybody who works at the BBC will know, Theo is the man on cars. Anything you wanted to keep an eye out for? Yeah, what are you looking at the minute?
I find it really confusing, Sean, at the moment, because we have this big debate of electric or not electric. I'm not somebody that likes hanging around, so the thought of kind of sitting for half an hour to charge a car is not exciting for me. So yeah, I've got a Q7 at the moment, an Audi. It just feels really clunky and big. It's great when I've got a million kids in the back of the car, but the rest of the time I find it really awkward and annoying to try and park in spaces that seem to get smaller and smaller. So yeah, I'm really confused about what to do. And there's such a delay on so many cars that actually you start to look and then you say, well, there's a waiting list till January or February. And you think, okay, that's not how I've bought a car before.
Theo, what have you seen that could tick the box for Kate?
Well, Kate might want to try one of the little electric golf cart affairs that they've got running down a section of closed road between the exhibition centre here and some of the city squares. I mean, there's electric scooters. There's all sorts of crazy little things here. They're trying to say that there are alternatives to the car. But in terms of electric cars, we're also seeing new charging systems that are supposed to speed up the charging process to 15 minutes and things like that. They're trying to make it more viable.
No, Theo, I love it. I want Kate to be ditching that Q7 and arriving at home on an electric scooter tomorrow, saying, this is it, guys.
Everyone's laughing now, Sean, thinking about me on a scooter.
Excellent. Nice one, Theo. Thanks for that. Theo Leggett there, who is our international business correspondent out in Munich at the International Mobility Show. Do you ever completely fancy that? I've had that thought a few times in the last few months there, Kate, of just getting rid of the car, making some kind of leap altogether. We'd cope, wouldn't we? The kids would cope.
I'm not sure. I'm with you there. I mean, actually, my school commute is really long, so that would be really difficult. But I think because if you go to certain places and if you kind of travel quite a bit, which I do, and actually, that's the one thing about the pandemic and lockdown that I did love, not having the commute, not sitting in traffic, not being on the M6. But ultimately, I need to get in the car and go to some random places to do training and work with businesses. And actually, there's no other way sometimes.
That is something we've heard from a lot of people, as the sort of the controversies over whether we should be even focusing as much on electric cars and looking more at public transport and trying to improve all that. For a lot of people, just the infrastructure isn't there to look elsewhere. Right, that's enough car chat, scooter chat. I'm looking forward to Kate on a scooter next time we speak to her. Will Walker-Arnott, who's with us from Charles Stanley. Will, you need to be keeping up with the Kardashians yourself these days, because front page the Financial Times, we know that the Financial Conduct Authority, the regulator, criticising specifically Kim Kardashian for promoting an untested cryptocurrency on her Instagram feed with millions and millions and millions of followers. This is becoming a bit of an issue for your industry, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the number one problem with cryptos, of course, is that they are, at the moment, it's the Wild West and they are pretty much unregulated. And so you're beginning to get noises both from the FCA, the regulator in the UK, and also the SEC, the regulator in the US, that they think they should now be having some involvement and regulation of these currencies. But celebrity endorsements, I suppose, they are an issue. They call it pump and dump in the old adage. I mean, I would be personally more worried about Elon Musk, because he's the one who really does influence the direction, sentiment behind, in particular, Bitcoin. And some of his comments, I think, are sailed pretty close to the wind. So it is an issue, and I think the regulators are right to be putting it on their agenda.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, Elon Musk might move the value of it, but in terms of getting new people involved in the currency who may not have done, all the research they should have done, when Kim Kardashian West, as she is on Instagram, with her 251 million followers, might be posting things like that. It's very difficult to stop people getting attracted by what somebody like Kim Kardashian is saying, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's going to be people who are effectively what I would term unsophisticated investors. They'll be completely new to it and not understand the risks involved and the volatility involved in a cryptocurrency. And it's you've got to question the motives behind the celebrity who's actually endorsing them as well, because clearly they've probably got a financial stake in the currency, and if they're promoting it, they're going to benefit. So there's lots for the regulators to chew on there.
You mentioned a bit earlier that Bitcoin has now become the official currency of El Salvador. It's become the first country to adopt Bitcoin as an official currency. I don't know what you know about the El Salvador economy, Will, and what that tells us about it.
One thing I do know is that remittances, i.e. when El Salvadorans are working abroad and send money back home, represents about a quarter of their GDP, so it's a pretty big part of it. And if you're moving to Bitcoin, then you're going to cut out some of the banks, which obviously make huge amounts of money charging them when they do these remittances. So I imagine that's what's driving it, but it does create lots of issues, and in particular, I would say money laundering. It will be a particular concern because it's going to be very difficult for financial institutions to identify the source of money and where it's come and has it come from illicit purposes.
Something a bit longer lasting and a bit more tangible. Aluminium, Will, has climbed to its highest price in a decade. So we're now talking, $2,800 a ton, up $1,000 a ton in just the last 12 months. What's going on there? How crucial is that in our lives?
I mean, the first thing to say is that it's not exclusive to aluminium. So all commodities, including tin and copper, have reached record highs this year, and there's the normal stories of resurgent demand after the pandemic and supply chain bottlenecks. But if you focus on aluminium particularly, well, aluminium is important because it's a very versatile and widely used metal. We use it in beer cans and construction industries and cars, which we were just talking about. And what's unique about aluminium and why the price has spiked over the last couple of weeks, well, in particular, over the weekend, we heard news of a military coup in Guinea. Now, Guinea is the world's second large producer of a raw material called bauxite, which is a key ingredient into aluminium. The other factor which has caused a spike in the price is actually China, which is one of the big producers of aluminium, is placing greater scrutiny on high polluting industries like aluminium as they attempt to meet climate goals. So they've been cutting back production as well. And so that has all led to this spike in the price over the recent weeks.
Hope you're well this morning. Are you heading back into the office? Are you one of the wave of people hitting the roads and the trains around the UK? James in Dalston's been in touch this morning. I noticed this in the papers a bit earlier, James. I need to do a bit of research to see if there was anything on the Wolverhampton to Manchester route. He says he's just found a ticket between London and Edinburgh on the new Lumo service from First Group. £13.30 with a rail card, he says. Now, that's what I call a fare. How many of them are out there? Has James got the only one at that price, or are there more? Let us know. That does look like a new service that is being put in place between London and Edinburgh, going up the east coast, alas. So Wolverhampton and Manchester will have to wait for those rival prices, but they'll come one day, I'm sure. Ian has been in touch saying he's got 120 quid for scrap copper heating pipes yesterday. He was only expecting about £50. How do you go about doing that? Nice surprises, Ian, I'm sure it was. How do you do it, Ian? Where do you go if you want to offload a bit of scrap copper like that? People might be quite intrigued as to what commodities they've got lying around the house. As Will Walker-Arnott was talking earlier of various commodity price rises. And another saying, is the solution with the NHS and social care just to keep increasing the funding? Whenever I visit a hospital, I see lots of financial waste. Does the UK really have the correct financial management in place for the health service? A friend had to visit A&E in Scarborough Hospital yesterday. Was told to be an 18-hour wait. Is that lack of funding or lack of good management? Well, the debate about how this new money is going to be spent will be pretty hot, and about how this new money is being raised as well. The Prime Minister is expected to unveil his plans to reform social care funding in England later today. An increase in national insurance widely expected. If that happens, it will break this promise Mr Johnson made just before the last general election.
Here's the kicker. Here's the really... We can do all these things without raising our income tax, VAT, or national insurance contributions. That's our guarantee.
So that was Boris Johnson outlining his party's manifesto pledge not to raise taxes in this parliament. With an ageing population, that debate about how we fund care in our old age has been going on for years and years. Simon Bottery is the social care lead at the King's Fund, which is an independent organisation which works to improve health and social care in England. He told 5 Live, people in England hoping to get funded care currently have to pass 2 tests.
You've got to demonstrate that your needs are high enough, and you really have to show that your needs are really pretty high indeed. But even if your needs are high enough, you've got to show that your means are low enough. And so you've got to show that your assets, and that could be your savings, it could be the value of the house, are below a figure of about £23,250. If your assets are above that figure, and for example, you want to go into a care home, then you'll pay for that care home yourself. So we've got at the moment a split between a relatively small amount of public funding and people paying for care themselves out of their own pocket.
So a lot of these plans could hinge on the national insurance announcements today. If you work, you probably pay it. How much do you actually know about it, though, other than it being just another line on the payslip? Emma Rawson is a technical officer from the Association of Taxation Technicians. Perfect guest for this morning. Morning to you, Emma.
Good morning.
It's the kind of moment where you get asked a lot more questions, I'm sure, by friends, family, colleagues alike about, right, what does this really mean? Now, we don't know what the final announcement is yet, but effectively a 1%-ish rise on national insurance, linked to national insurance, looks like it's on the way. What does that mean in terms of who's going to actually be paying for this?
Well, national insurance is a funny one because it's a bit of a misnomer. It's not an insurance fund per se. It is just another form of tax. So as you say, you'll see it on your payslip. And it's a tax that's payable on money that you earn through work. So that might be if you're in a job as an employee, or if you're self-employed, and employers also pay it as well. So it is very much tied into sort of work in that respect. It's linked to state benefits. But not in the way that some people think, I think. So you do have to pay so many years national insurance contributions to get certain state benefits. So, for example, your state pension. So it's very important in that respect. What it isn't is a pot that you're sort of personally saving into. So it's not like a workplace pension where you're putting money in that will pay out to you later on. The way it works is very much on a sort of pay-as-you-go basis. So the national insurance contributions you pay today are actually paying for benefits that are being paid out today. So today's pension's being paid out. So the raise that we're talking about, it will be working age people that are paying it, and it will be used to pay benefits on to other people and potentially this social care levy that we're talking about.
Yeah, and what do you make of it literally being called a health and social care levy and it having another line on the payslip below your income tax deductions, below your national insurance deductions, then there being a health and social care levy? What does that tell you about what the tax really is?
I think it's always difficult when you want to say you're earmarking a certain amount of tax. It always, in reality, is a little bit difficult to do that, and there's lots of people have spoken about the difficulties around that. I'm not sure what the proposal is around you just wrapping this up into a general increase of 1% in all the NIC rates that we're talking about, which you won't see, or if we want to go down the path of sort of splitting it out so people can say how much they're putting into this. I think that's a bit of a sort of political decision as to how it's dressed up, really, to be honest.
Yeah, and one of the things that's sort of mentioned alongside that dressing up is that actually working people who are of a age to be able to claim the state pension but are still working would actually pay this levy. That would be quite a difference between the current sort of national insurance rules, wouldn't it?
That would very much, yeah. So national insurance, very different beast to sort of income tax and what you're saying there. National insurance, one of the key things with that is that you stop paying it when you reach state pension age. So even if you keep working past state pension age, you don't pay national insurance contributions on your salary or the money you earn. And also your pension itself isn't subject to national insurance contributions. So that's why you'll see people talking about this being a tax paid more by younger working people than it is by the older generation.
And is there an obvious demographic of, if national insurance goes up, then, this type of household, this type of person will be hit hardest?
Yeah, you're looking primarily at people, as I say, below state pension age. And the other sort of strange thing about national insurance contributions is the way they work. So you actually start paying them at a lower level of earnings than income tax. So for income tax, you can earn £12,570 a year before you start paying tax. But for national insurance contributions, it's actually about £9,500. So they do hit sort of the lower income end of the spectrum. And then when you get to the higher end of the spectrum, unlike income tax again, which goes up, so you go into a higher band, you actually go down a bit. So once you start earning over £50,000, your rate drops. So if you're in a job, it goes from 12% to 2%. So you're really looking at people in that sort of £9,500 to £50,000 bracket who are probably going to be paying more on that.
And what about what kind of businesses will most likely be affected by this? And which businesses won't be affected at all by a national insurance increase?
Well, it's not so much businesses, because if you are sort of self-employed or if you are an employee or you employ people, you'll all be paying that if it's extra national insurance contributions. The things that won't be charged on, if it follows the NICs, is investment income. So things like dividends you take out from a company, bank interest, rental income that you have from a property. So those are not subject to national insurance contributions. So they would be sort of left out there.
So Kate McCarthy-Booth is with me this morning, who's a non-exec advisor, founder of McCarthy Recruitment. Kate, it sounds then like the type of businesses that will be affected are those that employ people, and you could be a landlord with no staff bringing in rents, and this won't affect you at all. Does it feel like a fair way to raise money from business?
It doesn't feel fair, and actually the way Emma describes it, I think really makes it a stark reality that it affects those people between the 9 and 50k bracket. And actually, even though I advise business, I've got my own business, Sean, and probably have never had the reality there the way Emma described it, that the rate drops at £50,000, which does seem unfair. And I think talking about that, is it a new tax and how is it dressed up? I think Emma's really right when she talks about how do they make sure that money goes into that pot. And I also think is it fair that those people that are working are paying for those people that aren't working? I think there is a problem. So I definitely see that there is an issue with the NHS and social care, and we do need to pay more tax to fund that. Am I sure that this is exactly the right way? I'm not sure about that at the minute, Sean, but it's complex.
For the people you're looking to recruit at the minute and helping find work, Kate, just looking, if you earn £20,000 a year, if this increase comes in, it would be an extra £130 a year in national insurance or tax, whatever you want to call it, that you'll be paying every year. If you earn £40,000 a year, that would be another £380 a year that will be going out of your take-home pay. Do those kind of things make a difference, do you think, to the people that you're talking to every day, looking at a salary on those levels?
I think it makes a difference to everybody how much is not coming home to you. And I think certainly people on lower incomes are struggling at the minute anyway. The cost of living is much higher. We just heard about, supply and demand and commodities, and that impacts. And we talked about Brexit and food, and Marks and Spencer's, they're talking about that coming to the cost of food on our shelves. That has a really big impact on people that are on low incomes. And then you take that. So when you say £130 a year, I think lots of people might think, oh, that's not a lot of money, but actually over a week, and when you're trying to make ends meet and you're trying to buy school uniform and food and for your family, it does make a difference.
And there's some big decisions that the Chancellor and Boris Jonson are having to make over, where the billions are spent and where it isn't. Marcus Rashford, I saw, was getting involved in the debate around universal credit cuts that are set to come in at the end of this month after those rises, the temporary rises that the government was saying that they were put in place during the pandemic. The Chancellor will see that as a way of not spending billions more. And Will walk on it from Charles Stanley, who's with us this morning. Pensions is another controversial sort of hot topic, because we've had this triple lock for a decade now, where pensions rise every year by whichever is the highest of inflation, the rates at which prices are rising, the rate at which wages are rising, so average earnings we talk about, or if 2.5% is the highest of the three, they go up by that much. And because wages have been shooting up, whether it's officially or not in the last year, people have been looking at potential state pension rises of 8 or 9%. But if the government don't do that, that means the triple lock's gone.
Yeah, it's another area which is fraught with political difficulties, but you can see why they're considering it, because, as you quite rightly pointed out, we're having a very, what we think is a transitory stage of inflation, but it's nevertheless, because you're comparing with this time last year, the cost of goods has increased hugely. So you can see while the government is looking at that. Another area which we haven't talked about, which has been on the radar for governments for quite some time, is capital gains tax. And the reason why some people thought that capital gains tax would be a good tax to increase is, number one, it's a lot lower than income tax at the moment, so it could be a good idea to just even that out a bit. And number two, you'd think that the people who pay capital gains tax are the people with the broadest shoulders, i.e. people who have got second homes or have got investments in the financial markets. But it seems to have gone very quiet again on capital gains tax after there being a lot of rumours earlier in the year that might be the one that they increase.
Emma, you're the tax expert. Does that seem like a good way to be raising money? Will's suggestion there?
Well, you often see this sort of talk of raising CGT, and I think it's one of these ones that comes around quite often. There is definite disparity between the rates of capital gains tax and income tax. Gains are taxed at a lower rate than income tax for various historic reasons. In terms of bringing the money in, it depends how much you want to bring in. So the income tax take is the biggest take. So if you just want to stick 1% on things, that will bring you in more money. Capital gains tax is a narrower base. So even if you put it up quite a bit, you might not get the same amount of money, but it is one that always comes round.
In terms of fundraising, actually, Emma, something that always comes up, we've just had a text message in about this. The government could collect loads more tax from companies avoiding paying tax, like Amazon, Ian says, and Amazon will say they're sticking by the rules. They're just playing the game that is there that governments around the world have laid out. But is it possible to make up those billions and billions of pounds of shortfall by taxing some of those companies more?
Not easily, I think, is the short answer to that. In recent years, since I started working in tax several years ago, we have started, we have taken steps towards cracking down on avoidance, and international efforts are ongoing. I think the thing is that when we look at sort of the tax take of the UK overall, most of our money comes from individuals. So it's coming from the income tax and the NICs, and the sort of tax gap that's there at the corporate end isn't as big, I think, as some people might imagine. So whilst there would be maybe some money to take there, if you want to raise the money, it's easier to take it, and you're more guaranteed to get it, I think, when you're looking at the taxes paid by individuals who are employed also by those large corporates. So, if you put your employer NICs up, that will hit Amazon as they employ people in the UK. Emma. So it's not as easy as saying, sort of stop the avoidance, I don't think, unfortunately.
Thanks so much for being with us this morning, Emma. Great to have a tax expert on the show.
Wake Up to Money from BBC Radio 5 Live.
Could be a pretty big day for the UK tax system, particularly as a way to fund social care in England and the backlog on the NHS that we're seeing at the moment. Emma Rawson there, who's from the Association of Taxation Technicians. Will, interesting news from figures published by the Insolvency Service. August showed the lowest figure for proposed job cuts for 7 years, despite the furlough scheme imminently coming to an end. What does that tell you about the state of the job market right now?
Yeah, I think that's pretty positive news, really, because we're beginning to enter this period of complete uncertainty where, if we're being honest, economists and investors and the like don't really know how the jobs market's going to react once we end this furlough scheme. Are these people going to be continue to be rehired by their companies, or are they going to be entering the jobs market? So it looks pretty encouraging, really, that people are continuing to be employed and we're not having a raft of new jobs or job hunters dumped on the market. So encouraging news.
So, Kate, what's the reality in the recruitment world then? What is it like day to day right now?
I think we'd actually like loads of job hunters dumped on the market, to be fair. There is a lack of candidate movement at the moment, and it's hard to fill vacancies. So most of my time is spent advising businesses at the minute on how to stand out, how to recruit differently, how to be more efficient with that, because people are struggling to fill certain jobs. We hear about skill shortages, and that is a definite issue in certain areas, whether it's HGV drivers or chefs. But actually, in general, gone are the days of this time last year when I was being asked, how many, 1,000 people have applied for a chef job. The applications are really low. Candidates are nervous to move. So because of that uncertainty that Will just talked about there, actually, it's more creating a lack of movement in that job market where candidates are thinking, well, you know what, if I've got a job, I'll stick with it because I don't know what's going to happen in the winter. Are we going to have another lockdown? Furloughs ending? So that is actually meaning that we've got this lack of movement, which does really affect things.
So that lack of movement, would you say to people who aren't looking to move right now that they're missing out on opportunities for better pay, better conditions elsewhere, and getting involved in the competition that's going on to try and get staff at the moment?
Absolutely. I do actually think it's a great time to move jobs if you've done your research and you know what you want. And I think, if you're talking to an expert that can advise you, and you've got to think about what it is, Sean, that is driving you to change and move. I don't necessarily I think money's important, but I don't think it's always the key driver. I personally think when I talk to candidates, you've got to be talking about, are you going to get career progression? You're going to get something else out of it as well. But I do think it's a great time to be looking for a job. There's some great roles out there. And look, 6 months ago, I was saying to businesses recruit now, because there are great people on the market, and that's going to change. And I was right with that. And I think, people were reticent to recruit. So I also think it's created a lot of vacancies all in one go as well. So I think that has happened. So I think people are feeling it because of that. But yeah, it's a very interesting jobs market at the moment. One I've not experienced for a very long time. I've been in recruitment 24 years, and it's not been as difficult as this to fill vacancies as it has been for a very long time.
Have you turned your hand to truck drivers yet?
No, I was asked to do delivery drivers about 5 years ago, and I said no to that as well. And there was a shortage then, so no, I think it's an ongoing difficulty.
Well, let's talk about it now in a bit more depth. It's been one that's come up almost every day on Wake Up to Money for quite a while now. We've seen the shortage of truck drivers having an impact on deliveries right across the economy. In response, some hauliers are putting up wages. The government says it's simplifying training, but how easy is it to actually get a test? If you've been listening to Wake Up to Money in recent weeks and months and thought, okay, right, I'm up for that. Well, Simon Johnston is managing director of Accidont, a driving school in Nottingham, which trains drivers for the military, but also has a small HGV school for civilians as well. Morning to you, Simon.
Good morning, Sean.
Are you seeing demand increase? Are you getting more questions about how do I train as a truck driver?
Yeah, we're getting more and more questions. We're getting more people who are looking to get into driving trucks of all different sort of sizes. One of the main issues we have, as you've pointed out, is getting driving tests. So we have a civilian school in Darlington. And we've had people travel from Preston, Halifax, Edinburgh to come and learn to drive with us. But our test slots are very, very limited.
So, what's the problem exactly? It seems a bit crazy that test slots might be limited given everything that's going on.
It's a national shortage of driving examiners at the same time as there's just a huge increase in demand. The Driving and Vehicle Standards Agency are doing everything they can. There are office staff who are now out delivering driving tests, but there are simply just not enough tests to meet the demand.
I mean, how many examiners are we short?
I don't know. I've heard rumours that we're short about 160 to 100,000 lorry drivers. I'm not sure how many examiners we're short.
Because it does seem that... Are you getting the impression from the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency that they're going to be able to make up that shortfall? Because if they don't, what are you going to do otherwise?
There's been a substantial recruitment for car driving examiners, and more recently there's been a recruitment process for lorry driving examiners. But you can't just magic examiners out of the hat. There's a training process. I think COVID has got in the way. So it seems to be quite a slow process of getting examiners actually to the front line and delivering driving tests.
So what's the reality for that part of your business then? I mean, are you just thinking, there's no point us growing it anymore?
With one particular location, I mean, it's losing money week over week. We're not getting sufficient tests to actually generate sufficient revenue. Luckily, other parts of our business are doing exceptionally well. If I was running a truck driving school and only in that particular location, I think I'd have probably thrown the towel in by now and gone, do you know what, it's just not worth doing.
I mean, Kate, as a recruiter, when you hear, you've got the people who want to train up to be that. We've got a national shortage of truck drivers. Are these the kind of issues you see in other sectors from time to time?
I think, I experienced this in the care sector in COVID when we were struggling to get candidates through fast enough, and bureaucracy. And I think the government has changed lots of things. They've relaxed the hours, but that's only until the 3rd of October, isn't it? And then what do we do after then? I think, this accentuates problems that have always been there that haven't ever been dealt with. The bureaucracy and slow process of some government organisations really does frustrate me, Sean, because in the private sector, if you operated like that, we'd go bust. And it's really frustrating sometimes that we can't say, right, there's a problem. Let's get together, sort a solution out and move fast. it just feels like, wading through treacle, and this just seems absolutely nuts. It's affecting flu jabs. People are actually having flu jabs cancelled because they can't get the vaccination there because of lorry drivers. There's got to be a solution that we can just crack on and change something. I get it. I get that obviously we can't magic up examiners, but we can do something different, surely.
Simon, I see you got a heavy goods licence yourself. You tempted to get on board?
No, I'm far too busy driving a desk and managing a business that trains between 4,000 and 4,500 people.
Was there a point in your career where you were using that licence and you thought, I don't want to do this anymore?
To be honest, Sean, I've never used my heavy goods licence as a licence to drive a lorry for work. I've used the licence and gone out and taught in that type of vehicle.
Got you. Because I just wonder from a distance, when you see the debate that's going on right now, and we get so many drivers every single day getting in touch with us saying, do you know what? It's not the training and it's not Brexit, it's the conditions. Why would you want to work? And we get the long list of how difficult it is for drivers right now. Do you think it's an attractive job?
At nearly 56 years old, Sean, I think no. For me, it isn't. As a young person coming into the industry, I'm not so sure. I think if you're working in a reasonably local area and you're working Monday to Friday, maybe Saturdays, and you're working day shift, that's great. But a lot of these HGV drivers are out 4 nights a week, sleeping in lay-bys, sleeping in their cabs.
Well,
it's not a hugely attractive proposition.
Simon, thanks for being with us this morning. Big thanks to Kate and Will as well.
Wake Up to Money from BBC 5 Live. That's it from Wake Up to Money. You can download the podcast every Monday to Friday, so please make sure you subscribe. We'd also love it if you left us a review when you do. Get in touch, keep the conversation going anytime as well on social media. Use the hashtag Wake Up to Money.